So I want you to just imagine a highly specific scenario for a second.
Okay.
Let's say you are doing absolutely everything right by, the modern self-improvement playbook. You're waking up at 5 in the morning.
Right, the classic 5 a.m. club.
Exactly. You're doing the cold plunges, you're journaling, you're optimizing your daily habits down to the absolute minute, right?
Sounds exhausting already.
It is. And you have these massive, audacious goals mapped out on your whiteboard, and you are genuinely putting in the sweat equity. But despite all of that sheer undeniable effort, you still feel completely and entirely stuck.
Yeah.
You feel like you're running in waist-deep mud or sprinting on a treadmill that is slowly but surely being cranked up to an incline you just can't sustain.
That is an incredibly frustrating place to be. And what's fascinating here is how universal that experience actually is.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Because when you find yourself in that specific scenario,
Yeah.
burning all this energy but going nowhere,
Yeah.
the immediate instinctual human reaction is to turn inward. We default to self-blame.
Oh, totally. We internalize the friction.
Right. The internal monologue immediately becomes, I must not be disciplined enough. I must not want this badly enough. There has to be a fatal flaw in my routine.
Right. You think, I just need to find a better productivity app.
Exactly.
I need to wake up at 4 instead of 5. I need to read one more book.
Yeah, just one more tweak will fix it.
But the material we are diving into today introduces a concept that completely shatters that narrative. It suggests that when you feel that persistent, exhausting friction, you might be looking at the completely wrong variables.
Which is a huge relief, honestly.
Well, it really is. The premise is that your mindset, your daily standards, and yes, even your income, are not these isolated, independent things that you alone control. They are heavily, continuously dictated by your environment.
Yeah.
So the hard truth we are looking at is this. You probably aren't stuck because of your habits. You are stuck because of the people you are surrounded by.
It is a really sobering realization to have, to look around a room and realize the feeling is, well, a lot lower than you thought.
Yeah.
But it's a profoundly necessary one to examine if you actually want to move forward. The goal of this deep dive is to unpack the psychological mechanics behind this.
Right.
To really understand how your social circle, the very people you call your friends, your family, your daily colleagues, might be acting as the primary anchor on your personal growth.
The primary anchor.
Yeah. And more importantly, we're going to walk through a highly practical framework for taking an honest inventory of that environment and upgrading it without necessarily having to burn every single bridge in your life.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I am genuinely fascinated by this pivot. Moving our focus away from this endless, exhausting cycle of self-flagellation over, tweaking our morning routines and instead turning a spotlight onto the architecture of our daily lives. Environmental design. It is completely counterintuitive to the pervasive, hustle culture narrative we hear constantly, which demands that everything rests 100% on your own individual willpower.
Which is a myth, by the way.
Right. But to actually understand how to upgrade our circle, we have to start by understanding the invisible psychological gravity that our current circle exerts on us.
The concept of invisible psychological gravity really captures the dynamic perfectly. There is a specific phrasing to this philosophy that we should really use to anchor this entire discussion.
What is it?
You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your environment.
Wow. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your environment. That is quite a paradigm shift.
It really is.
We're constantly sold the idea of goals acting like magnets, right? These bright, shiny things in the future that are going to pull us upward if we just stare at them hard enough.
We completely romanticize goals, but the reality of human behavioral psychology points in a very different direction. Our environment is the actual unyielding baseline.
Okay, so what does that actually look like?
Let's look at what actually constitutes a limiting environment. Consider the ambient noise of your daily life. Are you spending the majority of your time around people who view complaining as a primary form of conversation?
Oh, man, I know a few of those.
Right. Are you surrounded by individuals who actively avoid risk, who are deeply suspicious of personal growth, and who have ultimately made a quiet pact to just, settle for whatever comfort is currently available to them?
I mean, if we are being completely honest, that describes a vast majority of the normal, everyday environments we move through.
Yeah, it really does.
The break room at a corporate job,
Yeah.
the sidelines of a kid's soccer game,
Exactly.
sometimes painfully the dinner table at home.
And this is where we have to look at the underlying psychological mechanism. because this is where the self-blame usually creeps back in.
Right, you think it's your fault.
Exactly. If you find yourself succumbing to the inertia of that break room, it does not mean you lack moral fiber. You are not weak. You are simply human. We are fundamentally social creatures, and our neurology is hardwired to adapt, to mirror, and to normalize the behaviors of the tribe around us.
The tribe.
Yes. If we look at this from an evolutionary standpoint, mirroring the tribe was not a choice. It was a biological imperative for survival.
Because if you didn't, you died.
Precisely. If the rest of the tribe was afraid of the dark, and you decided to boldly wander out into the night alone, you didn't become a visionary. You became prey.
So conforming was literally a matter of life and death. You matched the baseline to stay in the cave.
Yes. And we are still walking around with that exact same neurological hardware today. The problem is that this survival mechanism is now working against our modern ambitions.
Because the cave is now just a boring office job.
Exactly. Slowly, quietly, and completely outside of your conscious awareness, you begin to adopt the thought patterns of the people in your immediate proximity. You begin to act like them. Your risk tolerance aligns with theirs.
That is terrifying.
It is. Even if you wake up with the most intense, fiery motivation to change your life, that motivation will eventually erode. It will be ground down until it perfectly matches the baseline of a risk-averse room.
I want to focus on that idea of erosion because it brings a really specific visual to mind for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think of your ambition, your daily drive, like a thick rubber band.
Sure.
You are holding one end of that band, and your environment, your social circle, your daily interactions is holding the other end. Now, you can stretch that rubber band as far as you want with sheer motivation.
Where you get really pumped up.
Yeah, you can listen to a pump-up playlist, go to a weekend seminar, get incredibly fired up, and stretch that band all the way across the room. But the environment is the anchor.
Yeah.
It is heavy, and more importantly, it is static.
Yeah.
It does not move.
Just sitting there.
Exactly. So the absolute second you get tired, the moment you get distracted or fatigued, well, I guess not, ... But that rubber band violently snaps you right back to its resting state.
That's a great analogy.
Which leads me to wonder about the mechanics of this. If mirroring is so deeply hardwired into our biology, does that mean relying on sheer willpower in the wrong room is a completely losing game?
What's fascinating here is that the behavioral data strongly suggests that it is, in fact, a losing game.
Really?
Yeah. Willpower is not a character trait. It is a finite cognitive resource. It depletes throughout the day. Every time you make a decision, every time you resist a temptation, every time you bite your tongue, you are draining that battery.
Okay, so it's exhaustible.
Highly exhaustible. Environment, on the other hand, is not an event. It is a constant ambient climate. It never sleeps. It never gets fatigued. It just continuously, relentlessly exerts pressure.
So you are bringing a battery to a fight against gravity.
That is exactly the dynamic. When you're operating in an environment that naturally normalizes complaining or settling or cynicism, you are forced to spend a massive portion of your finite daily willpower just resisting that baseline.
Just to stay afloat.
Right. By the time you actually sit down to do the difficult work of building your business or writing your book or improving your health, your cognitive battery is already flashing red.
You're empty.
You've spent all your available energy just trying not to be pulled under the water, rather than using that energy to swim toward the shore.
That is a phenomenal distinction. The difference between energy spent resisting the baseline versus energy actually spent growing.
It's massive.
But here's the tricky part. This gravity is invisible. It's not like a cartoon villain twirling a mustache and telling us to give up on our dreams.
Right, they aren't that obvious.
So how do we actually spot its influence in our day-to-day lives? How do we diagnose a room? Because there are specific conversational symptoms we can look out for.
There are very distinct behavioral red flags. The clearest diagnostic test is simply to observe the reaction when you introduce the concept of forward momentum into your current circle.
Forward momentum, okay.
Watch what happens when you share a new goal. Do they laugh it off? Do they immediately list all the reasons it won't work?
Oh, the devil's advocates?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you try to pivot a conversation toward growth or ideas, do they awkwardly change the topic back to something familiar? Or, perhaps most tellingly, when you actually start taking steps to improve your life, do they accuse you of changing?
Oof. Let's really linger on this because I think we need to paint a very vivid picture of what this actually feels like in real time.
Yeah, let's set a scene.
Let's take the classic example of a Friday night dinner or, grabbing drinks with a group of friends you've known for a decade. You sit down, the menus are handed out, and instead of engaging in the usual banter about how terrible the week was, you bring up a new reality. You mentioned that you are taking night classes, or you are trying to launch a side business, or you've started training for a marathon. Suddenly, the air in the room just gets thick.
The whole vibe changes.
The tone shifts. If we look at the underlying anatomy of these social groups, we're really talking about two totally different ecosystems of conversation. On one side, we have what we can call the gossip or surviving environment.
Right.
On the other side, we have the vision or growing environment. I want to spend some real time exploring the vast, cavernous difference between existing in those two spaces.
The contrast between a gossip-driven room and a vision-driven room is profound, and the emotional toll of each is vastly different.
How so?
Well, let's start with the gossip environment, the surviving circle. In these groups, the primary currency of human connection is shared misery or shared judgment.
Ah, shared misery.
Yeah. If I complain bitterly about my terrible boss, and you complain bitterly about your terrible boss, we experience a momentary spark of connection. We feel validated. We are surviving the injustice of the world together.
It's a very cheap, easy form of intimacy.
Very cheap.
It doesn't require any vulnerability to complain about the weather or the economy or Dave from accounting.
Exactly. But that bond comes with a hidden, incredibly steep price tag. It requires both of you to remain perpetual victims of your circumstances.
Wow.
In a surviving environment, the collective attention is always focused outward on variables that are completely outside of your control. The conversation circles endlessly around what other people are doing wrong, how the system is rigged, or reliving past grievances.
It sounds exhausting.
It is a fundamentally passive state of existence. The implicit agreement in the room is, we are acted upon by the world, and all we can do is sit here and analyze how unfair it is.
It feels like treading water in a very small pool. You aren't drowning, but you certainly aren't going anywhere.
Precisely.
Now, let's teleport that same person out of that restaurant and drop them into a vision-driven environment. Let's say it's a mastermind group, or a dinner with entrepreneurs, or just a few friends who are deeply committed to personal development. What happens to the conversational currency there?
The entire frequency shifts. In a growing environment, the currency of connection is shared possibility.
Shared possibility, I like that.
The focus is no longer external and backward-looking. It is internal and forward-looking. The questions change from, can you believe what happened to me, to, what are we building next?
What did you learn from that failure?
Yes. How can we creatively bypass this obstacle? When you're steeped in a vision environment, the underlying assumption of the room is agency. The implicit agreement is that you have the power to shape your reality.
And the friction happens when you try to cross the streams.
Oh, absolutely.
When you have internally shifted to a vision mindset, but your physical body is still sitting at the gossip table.
The friction in that moment is immediate, visceral, and highly uncomfortable for everyone involved.
And that discomfort usually manifests as an attack. It's that phrase we mentioned earlier, the one that always stings, "You've changed."
Yes, the classic line.
Now, usually when someone drops that line on you, like, "Wow, you've really changed," it is intended as a slight. It's a way of implying that you've abandoned your roots, or you've become arrogant, or you suddenly think you are better than everyone else.
That's how it's designed to feel, yeah.
But I want to dig into the psychology of the person saying that. Why does evolving trigger that specific accusation? What is actually going on under the hood of that friend's brain when they throw that phrase at you? Is it really about your new marathon training schedule, or is it something deeper?
It is almost never about your marathon schedule. It is entirely about their own reflection.
Their reflection.
This goes back to the concept of the psychological mirror. When everyone in a specific social circle is comfortable being average, nobody feels any guilt or anxiety about being average. It is the normalized baseline.
Right.
If everyone eats junk food and skips the gym, no one feels bad about eating junk food and skipping the gym. But the precise moment one person in that collective decides to elevate their standards.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. The moment you stop drinking on Friday nights so you can wake up early and code, or the moment you pass on the donuts to eat a salad, you inadvertently become a walking, talking, breathing mirror.
Oh, man. You become the mirror that reflects the reality of the room.
You do. Your sudden forward momentum strips away their excuses. By simply existing and evolving, you are forcing them to confront their own stagnation.
That's a hard truth for them to swallow.
Very hard. Suddenly, the fact that they aren't pursuing their dreams isn't because the world is unfair. It's because they are choosing not to. And human beings will go to incredible lengths to avoid confronting that kind of cognitive dissonance.
So they attack.
They have two choices. They can either look at the mirror you are holding up, acknowledge their own complacency, and do the agonizingly hard work of elevating their own lives.
Which is really, really hard.
Or they could just break the mirror.
Wow.
They could try to pull you back down so they don't have to face their own reflection anymore. When someone says, "You've changed," it is a tactic designed to induce guilt. It is an emotional lever they are pulling, using your shared history and social bond to yank you back into the comfort zone of the collective.
That makes so much sense.
When they laugh at your goals, they are not laughing because your goals are inherently silly. They are laughing to minimize the threat your ambition poses to their psychological comfort.
That is such a vital reframe. It takes the sting completely out of the rejection. It's not about you, and it's not about the validity of your goal. It is an act of pure emotional self-preservation on their part.
Exactly.
Your momentum is a threat to their static position. Okay, so we've established that this ambient gravity dictates our mindset, our daily emotional state, and our conversational habits. But it is one thing to say your friends hold back your personal growth in an abstract philosophical way. The framework we are exploring takes this a massive step further. It makes a highly tangible, easily measurable claim. It posits that your social circle is actively, mathematically capping your income.
This is where the theory leaves the realm of self-help and enters the realm of harsh economic reality.
Yeah.
The assertion here is that your income is not fundamentally based on your skills.
Which is wild.
It is an incredibly tough pill to swallow for anyone who has spent years accumulating university degrees, specialized certifications, and technical proficiencies.
Yeah, because we're taught the opposite.
The entire traditional educational and corporate narrative teaches us that skill equals compensation. You get better at the widget, you get paid more for the widget.
Right.
But the reality is that income is deeply tethered to what you believe is possible, what you are exposed to daily, and what your immediate environment normalizes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to use a thermostat analogy to really visualize how this income capping works.
Oh, I like this one.
Think of your individual potential, your ambition, your drive, your raw talent as the heater in a room. You can crank that heater up as high as you want, but the social circle you are embedded in acts as the room's thermostat. Let's say the financial thermostat of your peer group is firmly set to average, let's call it a comfortable 70 degrees. Everyone makes about the same amount of money, lives in the same kind of houses, takes the same kind of vacations.
A very standard setup.
Now, let's say you decide you want to heat your life up to 90 degrees. You want to double your income. The moment you start taking actions to generate that heat, the thermostat recognizes the anomaly and immediately kicks on the air conditioning to cool things back down to the 70-degree baseline.
The AC kicks in.
Yes. This AC comes in the form of subtle comments. Why are you working so late? You're obsessed with money. Don't you think that investment is incredibly risky? Just be happy with what you have. Trying to break out of the financial bracket of your peers literally feels like fighting the climate of the room.
It really does.
Oh, wait, I have to push back here just to play devil's advocate for a moment because it sounds a little bit like The Secret, you know? Just be around rich people and you'll get rich.
Right. Magical thinking.
Yeah. Let's say I am a highly specialized, brilliant software coder. My hard skills are undeniable. If my code is flawless, I'm going to get paid like a flawless coder, right? How does simply seeing other people take risks or having a different conversational environment actually translate into a larger paycheck for my specific skill set?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand the mechanism, we have to decouple the possession of a skill from the monetization of that skill.
Oh, okay.
The skill itself, your brilliant coding ability, is merely the vehicle. You have a very fast car.
Yeah.
But belief, audacity, and daily exposure, those are the fuel.
The fuel.
And the environment dictates whether you ever actually turn the key in the ignition.
Give me an example of that.
Let's look at your brilliant coder. Imagine this coder is the most technically gifted programmer in their city. However, their entire social circle consists of people who deeply believe that working a safe, predictable, low-paying corporate job for 40 years is the only responsible way to exist.
Very 70-degree room.
Very. In that environment, the highest virtue is security, and the greatest sin is risk. What happens when this coder has a late-night epiphany for a disruptive, highly scalable tech startup?
They probably talk themselves out of it before breakfast, because the moment they mention it to their friends, the friends will outline all the ways startups fail, how they could lose their savings, and how they should just appreciate their current 401k match.
Precisely. The environment categorizes the ambition as dangerous, foolish, or arrogant. The coder will be advised to play it safe. Consequently, they will never take the risk required to achieve a massive financial return on their coding skills. They will remain a brilliantly skilled employee earning a 70-degree salary.
Man, that's sad.
Now, teleport that exact same coder with the exact same technical skills into an environment where everyone is an entrepreneur. A room where people are constantly building prototypes, failing publicly, losing money, raising capital, and trying again.
A completely different world.
In that environment, the baseline is motion. Massive growth, taking big swings, and experiencing high-risk, high-reward ventures doesn't feel like a reckless leap into the dark. It just feels like Tuesday. It is normalized.
Wow, just Tuesday.
That coder in the second environment will launch the startup, or at the very least, they will ask for equity instead of a bonus. They will negotiate much harder, and they will leverage their skills in vastly different ways, simply because their environment has normalized that audacity.
That is brilliant. It's not about the environment magically giving you skills. It's about the environment dictating the ceiling of where you are willing to apply the talents you already have.
Exactly. It's the anchoring effect.
Right. If you only see people making $60,000 a year, your subconscious brain anchors to that number. That becomes the definition of normal, and anything beyond it registers as either unrealistic fantasy or greedy.
Yep.
But if you are having coffee every single morning with people who are legally and ethically making $500,000 a year, well, suddenly your brain recalibrates. It says, oh, wait, this isn't magic. This is just how this specific ecosystem works. You adjust your actions to match the new reality. It completely demystifies wealth.
Demystification is the crucial word there. It removes the psychological friction. When extraordinary success is demystified by daily proximity, when you see the mundane, unglamorous, step-by-step actions that actually lead to wealth, the mountain no longer looks impossible to climb.
Because you see the path.
You stop viewing financial or personal growth as an anomaly reserved for the lucky few, and you start seeing it as a standard operating procedure.
Okay, so if we accept this premise, if the environment fundamentally dictates our mindset, our emotional state, our income, and essentially the trajectory of our entire lives, the logical, glaring next question is, why is it so incredibly hard to just walk away?
That is the big question.
If I look at the thermostat, realize my room is set to 70 degrees, and I want to live at 90, why don't I just turn the knob, open the door, and leave the room?
Well, this brings us to what the framework identifies as a deeply ingrained, almost paralyzing emotional barrier. It calls it the hard truth.
Hard truth.
The hard truth is undeniably the most difficult emotional hurdle in this entire process. The concept states clearly, you cannot grow in the same environment that made you small.
Oof.
And it directly challenges our societal understanding of a very sacred concept, loyalty. The framework acknowledges that loyalty is a virtue, but warns that it becomes a vice when it costs you your future. The absolute stance it takes, which many find highly provocative, is this: you do not owe anyone your potential.
You do not owe anyone your potential. That is a staggering sentence.
Yeah. It really hits hard.
It completely detonates the script on how we are taught to view relationships and community. From childhood, we are indoctrinated with the idea that loyalty is an ultimate, unquestionable virtue. You ride or die with your crew, you never forget where you came from, you stick by your people through thick and thin, no matter what.
And that sounds noble.
It does. And look, this sounds highly logical on paper, but we're often talking about childhood friends or family members here. It is very easy to read a self-help book that says, just leave the toxic environment and nod along logically. But in reality, we are usually talking about complex human beings.
Exactly. These are real emotional ties.
We are talking about siblings. We are talking about people who perhaps supported us when we were at our lowest. These aren't just random, faceless acquaintances in a corporate break room. Leaving them feels like a profound betrayal.
It feels like you're abandoning them.
I always think of the analogy of a tree outgrowing its pot.
Okay, walk me through that.
Imagine you have a tiny oak sapling, and you plant it in a beautiful, small ceramic pot. For the first few years of that tree's life, that pot is exactly what it needs. It provides structure, it holds the nutrient-rich soil, it offers safety from the elements, the pot nurtures the sapling.
Right.
But eventually, inevitably, the tree grows, the root system expands, and suddenly those roots hit the hard, unyielding ceramic walls of the pot.
It runs out of room.
Now, you cannot force a giant maturing oak tree to stay in a tiny ceramic pot just out of a sense of loyalty to the pot. Well, the pot was so good to me when I was a sapling, I should just stay here. If you do that, the roots will become bound. They will begin to choke each other. The tree will be permanently stunted, and eventually it will rot and die.
That's a vivid image.
You have to repot it into a larger space for it to reach its potential. But repotting is an inherently violent act. You have to pull the tree out of the familiar soil. You disrupt the root system. It is shocking to the tree, and it is shocking to the pot.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the agonizing tension between the virtue of loyalty and the devastating cost of shared stagnation. The core problem arises when we conflate loyalty with an agreement to remain small together.
Ooh, an agreement to remain small together.
True loyalty, the highest form of love and friendship, should be an active support of someone's highest potential. It should be the pot cheering for the tree as it is moved to the forest.
That's beautiful.
When a circle demands that you artificially suppress your growth to make them feel comfortable, they are not asking for loyalty. They are asking for a hostage.
A hostage?
Well, the philosophical shift required here is brutal but necessary. You have to reframe your understanding of what staying actually means. You must stop viewing your decision to remain in a limiting environment as being a good, loyal friend, and start recognizing it for what it actually is: an active, conscious decision to limit yourself.
Wow, an active, conscious decision to limit yourself. That reframe strips away all the romanticism, doesn't it?
It completely exposes it.
Because when you frame your stagnation as loyalty, you get to be the martyr. You get to feel noble about your lack of progress. You can sit at the bar and say, yeah, I could have moved to the city and started that company, but I stayed loyal to my hometown crew. I'm a good guy.
Right.
It's a very cozy, ego-protecting narrative. But when you strip that away and realize you are just choosing fear over potential, the nobility vanishes.
And the guilt associated with that realization is often the heaviest anchor of all. We carry the subconscious belief that by stepping into our potential, by repotting ourselves, we are somehow abandoning or condemning those who cannot or will not make the journey with us. We feel survivor's guilt.
Yeah, that survivor's guilt is real.
But the reality is unequivocal. Staying behind to drown with them does not save them, and it guarantees your own destruction. You cannot be a life raft if you are actively taking on water.
Which brings us to a highly critical, practical juncture in this deep dive. Recognizing the loyalty trap, acknowledging that the tree desperately needs a new pot, is the crucial philosophical shift. But philosophy only gets us so far.
Right. We need action.
What is the practical application? Because if the advice here is just a binary, burn every bridge, block your mother's phone number, and abandon everyone you have ever loved, that is neither helpful nor realistic for 99% of people.
Thankfully, no, that is not the advice.
Right. Thankfully, the framework provides a highly strategic, step-by-step audit to take control of your environment without necessarily causing a nuclear explosion in your personal life. Let's walk through how to actually execute this.
The transition from theory to practice begins with step 1, the strategic audit. You are instructed to sit down and ask yourself 3 very simple yet highly revealing questions about the people you interact with daily.
Okay, what are they?
Who inspires me?
Yeah.
Who drains me? And who challenges me?
Inspire, drain, challenge.
Exactly. The critical caveat here is the lens through which you conduct this audit. It must be brutally honest and entirely unemotional.
The unemotional part is the linchpin of the whole operation. Because if you let emotion in, you immediately start making excuses. Let's bring in a hypothetical character to illustrate this. Let's call him Dave from Little League.
Okay, good.
Emotionally, you look at your audit and think, well, Dave calls me 3 times a week and complains endlessly about his life, his wife, and his job. I feel exhausted every time I hang up the phone, but we played Little League together when we were 9. He was at my wedding. He's deep down a great guy.
Right. The excuses start flowing.
Honesty requires you to temporarily suspend the Little League history. You have to look purely at the energy exchange happening in the present moment. Is Dave a net positive or a net negative on your current growth trajectory? It's like looking at a financial ledger, but instead of tracking dollars, you are tracking your finite cognitive energy.
It is exactly an energetic ledger.
Yeah.
You are assessing the ROI, the return on investment of your emotional output. And once you have conducted that honest audit and identified the individuals who consistently drain your ledger, you move to step 2.
What's step 2?
Step 2 provides an immense amount of psychological relief for people terrified of confrontation. The directive is simple: reduce exposure. The explicit instruction is that you do not need to cut people off completely, and you do not have to be dramatic.
Oh, that's such a relief.
You are advised to simply spend less time, engage less deeply, and aggressively protect your energy.
I love that clause. You don't have to be dramatic. You don't have to send a long, passive-aggressive text message formally announcing your resignation from the friendship. You don't have to have a cinematic screaming match in the rain.
Please don't do that.
But from a purely logistical standpoint, how do you practically engage less deeply without coming across as cold, arrogant, or aloof to old friends? Let's go back to Dave. Dave calls you on a Tuesday night to complain about his boss for the 4th time this month. How do you navigate that without being a jerk?
It takes practice.
I visualize this tactic like deploying an energetic umbrella. If Dave is a rainstorm of negativity, you can still stand outside in the rain with him. You can be present in the relationship, but you open this invisible umbrella. You allow his complaints to just bounce off the canopy. You aren't letting yourself get completely soaked to the bone by his issues anymore. You refuse to absorb the water.
The energetic umbrella is a fantastic visual metaphor for what clinical psychologists refer to as establishing internal boundaries. Engaging less deeply does not equate to being cruel. It simply means shifting the parameters of your availability and your emotional investment.
Okay, so what does that look like in real life?
Practically, this looks like taking control of the logistics of the interaction. If you historically meet Dave for a 3-hour dinner where he dominates the conversation with grievances, you reduce exposure by changing the venue. You meet him for a strict 45-minute coffee instead. You control the time container.
The time container, I like that.
Furthermore, when he inevitably begins to spiral into his familiar complaints, engaging less deeply means you change your reaction. You stop offering solutions. You stop trying to fix him. You stop matching his outrage with your own energy.
You just go neutral.
You simply offer neutral, polite, non-committal acknowledgments. That sounds really frustrating, Dave. I can see why that would be annoying. You give the complaint no oxygen to burn. And then, crucially, you pivot the conversation, or you initiate your exit strategy.
Wow, that's crazy, Dave. Oh, shoot, look at the time. I have a hard stop right now. Great seeing you.
Exactly that. You're protecting your energy, which the framework implies is arguably more vital than protecting your time. Time is just the chronological hours you spend. Energy is the cognitive and emotional hangover the interaction leaves you with long after you have parted ways.
The emotional hangover, that's so real.
If a 30-minute phone call with Dave leaves you feeling depleted, cynical, and exhausted for the next 4 hours, you haven't lost 30 minutes. You have lost 4.5 hours of productive potential. That is an unacceptable energy leak, and the umbrella stops the leak.
Okay, so we've done the unemotional audit. We've recognized the drainers on our ledger. We've successfully deployed the energetic umbrella. We are reducing our exposure, and we are fiercely protecting our energy.
Yes, defense is set.
But now we run into a vacuum problem. By reducing exposure to the drainers, we've created a void. We have empty space in our calendar and quiet space in our minds. How do we fill it with growth? Especially, and this is a massive hurdle for a lot of people listening, what if you look around your physical environment, your tiny hometown, or your specific corporate cubicle farm, and you realize with horror that you don't actually know any growth-oriented people in real life?
A very common problem.
The framework gives us steps 3, 4, and 5 to rebuild the ecosystem from scratch.
This is the moment the framework transitions from playing defense to playing offense. Step 3 is upgrade your inputs. The text acknowledges the very real possibility that you might not have the right people physically present in your zip code right now. The brilliant solution it offers is the creation of a virtual circle.
A virtual circle?
Yes. You construct this virtual circle by strategically consuming podcasts, reading books, watching lectures, and immersing yourself in conversations that elevate your baseline thinking. The core insight here is that your environment is not strictly defined by physical geography. Your environment is primarily mental.
I want to put that in bold neon letters. Your environment is not just physical, it is mental. That is an incredibly empowering realization.
It changes everything.
It means you're not geographically doomed. It doesn't matter if you live in a town of 500 people where the height of ambition is happy hour on Friday. You can still spend 3 hours a day commuting, folding laundry, and walking the dog with the greatest minds in the history of the world speaking directly into your earbuds. You can have Billionaires, stoic philosophers, peak performance psychologists, and world-class artists as your constant companions. They become your new baseline. They become the 90-degree thermostat that recalibrates your brain.
The neuroplasticity of the brain is fascinating in this regard. The brain does not strictly differentiate between a physical, face-to-face conversation and a highly engaging, immersive, virtual one when it comes to baseline normalization.
Really, it just absorbs it all the same.
Mostly, yes. If you relentlessly immerse your mental environment in the frequency of growth, discipline, and possibility, your internal standards will inevitably rise to meet that frequency.
That is incredible.
Which bridges perfectly into step 4, find growth-oriented people. Once your internal standards have been elevated via your virtual circle, you will naturally begin to actively look for people in the real world who operate on that same frequency.
Because you're now speaking their language.
Exactly. You look for people who talk about ideas, who take bold action, and who demand more from life.
Yeah.
And the text night's a very comforting metric. You don't need a massive army. Even finding just one person who aligns with this new standard can completely alter your trajectory.
Just one single person. Because that one person is living proof that the virtual circle isn't just theory. They validate the new mental environment you've been painstakingly building.
Right. And then we arrive at the zenith of the framework, step 5.
What's step 5?
The source calls this the most powerful, paradigm-shifting move of all. Step 5 is become the standard.
Become the standard.
The instruction is beautifully simple, but endlessly difficult. Be the person you are looking for. Be disciplined, be focused, be growth-driven. And the promise the framework makes is that if you do this consistently, slowly but surely, the environment will begin to bend and change around you.
This raises an important question, though. Why?
Well, this step demands that we look at the actual physics of human connection and group dynamics. Why does simply becoming the standard alter the external environment? It operates on the dual principles of magnetism and resonance.
Magnetism and resonance.
When you fully embody discipline, relentless focus, and a growth-driven mindset, you naturally begin to act as a polarizing force. You will naturally repel those who are deeply committed to their own stagnation.
I just get annoyed by you.
Exactly. They will eventually find you too intense or annoying or obsessed, and they will voluntarily distance themselves. Simultaneously, you will naturally attract those who are broadcasting on a similar frequency. You become a visible beacon in the dark.
So you don't have to chase them down.
No. Instead of endlessly wandering from room to room, searching for the perfect pre-existing utopia of growth-oriented peers, you build the room yourself by acting as the immovable anchor.
So, what does this all mean? If we step back and synthesize this entire journey, from the painful realization of the invisible gravity of our old circle, to navigating the treacherous waters of the loyalty trap, to constructing a virtual circle out of thin air, and finally doing the hard work of becoming the standard ourselves.
Yeah, it's a huge journey.
Does this mean that the ultimate endpoint of this process isn't just about our own success? If we successfully become the standard, are we essentially becoming the growth-oriented person that might serve as the catalyst for someone else's evolution? Are we becoming the exact person that some stranger out there is desperately looking for in their step 4?
That is the ultimate profound realization of this entire philosophy. By ruthlessly elevating yourself, by auditing your circle and repotting your tree, you not only change your own trajectory and unlock your own potential, you become the upward gravitational pull for someone else. You become the 90-degree thermostat that forces someone else in a cold room to suddenly realize they have the capacity to be warmer. You introduce the vision environment to someone who has, up until meeting you, only ever known the gossip environment.
That is a remarkably beautiful way to view it. It takes this entire framework from being a purely defensive, almost selfish endeavor, like I need to cut dead weight out of my life so I can make more money, and elevates it into a deeply generous, generative act. I need to aggressively elevate my own standards so that I can be a lighthouse for others who are looking for permission to grow.
It is the fundamental difference between merely surviving your environment and actively evolving the world around you. And as we look to distill the ultimate takeaway from all the material we've covered today, it really boils down to a stark, binary reality.
What's the reality?
The philosophy states, you do not become what you want in life. You become what you are consistently surrounded by. Your social circle right now, in real time as you listen to this, is doing one of two things. It is either actively building your future, or it is silently destroying it.
Mm.
There is no neutral ground. There's no holding pattern.
Silently destroying it. That is the invisible force we started this entire conversation talking about. Ambient gravity.
Exactly.
Listen, if you are hearing this right now and you felt a sudden sharp knot in your stomach during this deep dive, maybe because a very specific friend's face popped into your head when we talked about the gossip table, or maybe because a lifelong family dynamic suddenly made terrifying sense, validate that feeling. Do not push that discomfort away.
Feel the friction.
The framework specifically reminds us that acute awareness is the very first mandatory step to actual change. You cannot fix a thermostat if you don't even realize the room is freezing.
The discomfort of that awareness is not a bad thing. It is the exact psychological friction required for growth. That knot in your stomach means your root system is finally hitting the hard edge of the ceramic pot, and you are realizing, perhaps for the first time, that it is time to be repotted.
Exactly. It means you are evolving. So to wrap this all up and bring it right back to where we started, think about that scenario from the very beginning of the show. You are doing everything right. You've got the habits, the goals, the routines, but you feel entirely stuck.
The mud.
We've spent this time realizing that the diagnostic X-ray we've been using to examine our lives has been pointed at the wrong body part. We've been obsessing over our individual habits when we desperately needed to be analyzing our communal environment. We've been trying to fix a broken arm, completely ignoring the fact that the water we're swimming in is toxic.
Beautifully said.
I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over on your own as you go about the rest of your day or as you sit in your commute. Based on everything we've unpacked, if your current mindset, your daily ambition, and your actual measurable income are quite literally a direct mirror of the 5 people you spend the most time with, who is currently holding the pen that is writing your future?
That's the question.
And more importantly, are you brave enough to take it back today? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Protect your environment, deploy your umbrella, and level up your life.